Well, hello and welcome back to the All Saints podcast. I'm here with your pastoral assistant, my very good friend, Tyler Turner. Tyler, thank you for joining us.
Of course, glad to be here.
So we are coming to the end of a three-part mini-series on the subject of the how and why of worship. And just to zoom out a little bit and see what we've done so far. So first time it was just me. I was talking about the kind of biblical covenant theological background, why we worship in the kind of way we do.
Okay.
Then last time we zoomed in on our actual worship service and asked some questions about why is it structured in this way. People who come to All Saints for the first time frequently, unless they've been to another CREC church, they're frequently surprised that an evangelical church has a fairly formal liturgical kind of structure. And
Sure.
there are actually really good reasons for that, and so I went through some of that. So that might be helpful to you if you've that's news to you. Well, this time I want to zoom out again, but in a different direction, towards thinking about the Lord's Day more generally.
Sure.
And so basically, I mean, to a certain extent, there's a bunch of abiding practical questions we've always got, like how best to use Sunday. There are some scriptural restrictions on the best use of the Lord's Day, which are there for our good and our flourishing. And it's good just to be clear about what those entail. But then at the same time, we've got some short-term practical changes that are going to be happening around here at All Saints. So as you know, by the time this comes out, this will be after Easter Sunday. And next Sunday, 27th of April, 2025, will be the first Sunday that we're looking at two services here. So we're going from 11 a.m., just a reminder, okay, in case you've forgotten. We're going from 11 a.m., one service with 100 and something people down in the fellowship hall, to 9 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., two services, which I'm looking forward to in the kind of way that you look forward to long days. No, it's going to be good. It's going to be great. But it means that for at least around about half of us, our Sunday routines are going to change dramatically. And even for those who are going to the second service, our Sunday routines will change a little bit. And it might just raise some practical questions about, okay, so well, what do we do now? If we're done with church at 9:30 in the morning, no, 9:30, 10:30 in the morning. Right. There's a whole bunch of new things that could pop up. Oh, I could go to the gym, or we could go to the cinema, or we go out to a restaurant for lunch. You know, all kinds of things that people might consider doing. And I think I'd like to offer some pastoral guidance about those things. But Tyler, enough from me. Do you want to just sketch, like, what's a normal Sunday look like for you at the moment? And then maybe we'll dig into that and just try and get at some of the rationale behind what you get up to on the Lord's Day.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we have a decent drive to the church these days, and so we try to utilize that amount of time as best as we can, both before and after the services. And so we've got a fairly robust scripture reading program we're doing with the kiddos, and so our older two are reading quite a bit during the week. We've got a couple of chapters every day that we're reading as a family, but as what happens just in the normal course of life, chapters are missed here and there. We've got baseball games in practice now in this season, and so normally Sunday mornings on the way to church, we're listening to those passages together. We're discussing things that they've anything that we weren't able to discuss prior during the week. And so what we're trying to do is utilize that time for discipleship in a more focused way than maybe the rest of the week. Obviously we're doing that, but it's not with the normal day-to-day grind of coming back after work and being tired and whatnot, trying to pick up some of the threads that may have been lost throughout the week and bring those together for a focused time of discipleship, both from Scripture as well as from events that have taken place during the week.
Right. And just remind us, how old are your kids?
Yeah, oldest is 11, then we've got 9, 6, and recently 4.
That wasn't a test. I knew you'd get that.
I got to keep track of the birthdays over the last week.
Yeah. So tell us about your lunchtime, Sunday afternoons, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. So we, because of our drive, what we try to do is have some food, snacks in the car waiting for us. So sushi has become a
Really?
packaged sushi, yeah, frozen so that it's defrosted by the time we get out of church. And so we've got to be creative a little bit for the ride home. The best times have been being able to spend time with other families in Fort Worth. And so unfortunately, I think we're a little limited as far as being able to invite people to lunch immediately after the service out where we are, but taking part with people's fellowship meals right after the service, just incredibly valuable. And I think both practically as well as theologically on the purpose of the Lord's Day, just increasing the fellowship and the unity among the saints, and that has been especially rewarding. Evening time, much of the time it's family time, and so we have games that we play together. Again, this is baseball, softball season, and so we're out throwing the balls around and just enjoying time together. A lot of times we really try not to engage. We've got house projects all the time, so really try to refrain from engaging in those things as much as possible. Try to leave any study work, those types of things that are generally part of the day-to-day work week, that really you're trying to preserve Monday through Saturday for those types of things, to leave Sundays for fellowship time and really rest time. We really try to limit entertainment things in the sense of just recognizing if we are really trying to rest, and we're at a season in our lives in which busyness is just it's just the name of the game. And so there's an unavoidable busyness to life. And so what we want to try to do is not default to the types of supposed rest that really are not restful at all. And so things, scrolling on social media or even TV shows and what, we really try to limit those things pretty drastically.
I have a hard time imagining you scrolling on social media on your light phone. That little kind of pixelated display.
Sure. Well, there are ways, but
yeah. Let me just double click on a couple of those things then, because
Sure.
I mean it's interesting. I mean, where to pick up some of those. I mean, just to highlight what you said about sushi snacks, that picks up for me such an important aspect of the Lord's Day, which is preparation.
Yes.
and being ready to getting stuff done in advance so you can enjoy this day.
Absolutely.
And it goes to not just, well, let's get some snacks in the car so that we don't have to stop at a service station or a kind of you wouldn't be stopping at Chick-fil-A on Sunday, which is part of the point. But so if the kids are going to need food, let's get some food,
right?
And let's get it ready. That you do get these debates about. Is it okay to go shopping? Is it okay to go to Starbucks? Is it okay to go to a restaurant? And I want to call us back in a sense to the principle that I think should guide us in. Well, there are several principles. Scripture was written in an era before there were restaurants and gas stations, but at the same time, the principles that it outlines of setting this day apart for rest, not working, giving rest to others who work because of you.
Definitely.
So neither you nor your maidservant, nor your servant nor your maidservant, etc., not even your livestock are supposed to be working on the Sabbath under the Old Covenant. And there's this kind of, I don't want to say, I've been in the situation driving back, 6 hours in the car on a Sunday evening, falling asleep at the wheel thinking, I need some coffee. Well, I'm going to stop and inject some caffeine from Starbucks or something.
Right.
And I don't feel that that's a compromise. But at the same time, there's a difference between that and it becoming a kind of lazy luxury to participate in sustaining an economy that keeps people working on Sundays.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, we have definitely not always been successful at that aspect of it. But it's even recognizing, we've talked about some of the modern sentiments of what's necessity versus what's not. And even, being hungry, our kids being hungry for 50 minutes as we're driving back, and
Yeah.
or we've got granola bars that it's really easy to just throw
Just
those
sling
in
them in the
yeah,
drop
just
box,
sling
yeah.
them in the car, and that's not gonna, of course it's not gonna be filling, but it's trying to at least try to stick to the principle in the best way that we can.
Yeah.
And recognizing what we want the rest that we enjoy. We want that for others as well. And I think that's a theological point that is really, really helpful of the generosity of our Lord that's been poured out onto us, that then we're able to turn around and give that same to others.
Yes.
Knowing, and this is where it gets tricky, is knowing that, well, for some, working on Sunday is a necessity, whether it's earning money that they absolutely need, especially if you're working, say, a minimum wage job or something where the hours have to stack up.
They just give you every second Tuesday and
Exactly.
every second Sunday. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there is some necessity there and some play there, but again, trying to bestow a lot of the blessing of having that rest on others. I've been in the contract working world some, and so of course on that side of things, you really try to protect Sundays at the same time. And then the same thing that I want to do for others, I'm really going to try hard not to ask other guys to come work on something for me if it's not absolutely necessary.
Yes.
And of course, what's necessary and what's not is kind of where it gets tricky.
Well, we were talking about this earlier. Just there is an inescapably culturally loaded pressure on those ideas of necessity.
Right.
So, for example, I mean, most of us would think, like, if you have if your plumbing just packs up and you've got no water coming out of the faucets, or if your air conditioning packs up on, midday in July in Texas, most of us would think, oh my goodness, let's call an emergency AC guy to fix the.
Sure.
And we wouldn't think that that's a breach of the spirit of the Sabbath regulations or the Lord's Day instructions of Scripture. And I don't think it is either. Right. But I just want to recognize that 150 years ago, nobody had air conditioning. And and so what we count as necessity is inevitably culturally laden. I mean, even more basic things, like nobody is going to say, I hope nobody's going to say, there's anything wrong with, let's say, emergency services, police, fire staff and medical staff working on the Lord's Day. In fact, I'd want to say that's the purpose of the Lord's Day. What a blessing that there are these people who are giving themselves to serve, pulling oxen out of ditches, metaphorically speaking.
Sure.
But 2,000 years ago, there are no police officers, no fire services, no hospitals, at least not of the kind that we recognize. And so it's one of these situations where you can't get very far by being legalistic and trying to make abstract principles that seem bomb-proof in every circumstance. I think you can get a lot further by saying, okay, look, what's the best I can do? What's the best we as a family can do to honor the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish here? And not so much we're trying to accomplish, that's probably badly phrased, to honor the spirit of what we're receiving from the Lord. The Lord wants to give us this day of rest. So how do we do it? So work really hard for 6 days and put in place the necessary preparation during those days so that if possible, you don't have to work on the Sunday.
Yeah, and I know it's been remarked on by many of our well-known teachers in the Reformed tradition, but the working on the 6 days is also an important point, I think, both on the preparation side for the Sabbath day, as well as just what is expected. That again, it's the cultural expectation of we've got the weekend. Saturday and Sunday, that's our off time. And there's, of course, there's ways in which that's true. It doesn't mean you have to hire on at a job that requires you to drive in 6 days a week or anything like that. But recognizing that Saturday, we don't want to fall into the temptation of being slothful as well. That Saturday,
you can do stuff on Saturday.
You can do stuff. You can do productive stuff.
I want to come to some of the things you said about your family, and there's a fascinating distinction that I think I first encountered from my old friend Steve Hayhow at Emmanuel in London between entertainment and rest. I think he might have got it from somebody else.
Okay.
But before we do that, let me just say a couple of basic, obvious things about worship. I mean, just to zoom back to where we were in the first session, like the seventh day of the old creation, the first day of the new, is foundationally a holy day. It's a day on which God draws nearer to us, in a sense, than he does the rest of the time. Sure. We don't get the Lord's Supper on Monday through Saturday. We don't get gathered corporate covenant renewal worship the rest of the time. There is a sort of presence with the community before God that we have there. Are the things we do in that context that we don't do the rest of the time, and we're missing out if those aren't a priority. It breaks my heart to hear of people, oh, it was late one last night, I didn't wake up until 12:30 and I didn't want to just show up for the fellowship meal. I found myself thinking, well, I'm sorry that you slept in that late. You're missing out, and it's going to the toll will be significant. The Lord can tell the difference between somebody who's working hard and is in a job as a brain surgeon where they just have to come and save somebody's life or whatever on Sunday, and somebody who just hasn't got an alarm clock and any self-discipline. And I guess I want to say, look, we want to make worship a priority. I think it's a growing church disease.
Sure.
A growing church disease to be less intentional and less disciplined, frankly, about worship on the Lord's Day. If you're in a church plant, and I've been there with 32 people, you're like, everybody is there, like on time or early every day, every Lord's Day.
Right.
And you get to a church of, we had 350 something communicants and probably a few people who were not taking the Lord's Supper last Sunday. Yeah. You get to a church of 350 pushing 400 people. You feel like you can be missed, and it doesn't matter, and it does matter. It matters for your soul, for your family. It matters for everybody else. Pastor Randy Booth is big on this. Like, your congregation needs you on the Lord's Day.
Right.
So let's just, that just needs to, maybe that should have come up first, but it's dropping.
Well, I think it's crucial to understand it as the Lord's Day.
Right.
Right. Not ours. Not in which. There are 6 days, to work, that's fundamental, but the content of that work in terms of the cultivation that God gives us, the dominion aspect of us over creation and whatnot. But the Lord's Day is we're gathering with Him, with the body of Christ. And so that, again, to kind of just tagging on to what I said earlier about gathering together with His people. And so whether that's, obviously the fundamental necessity of gathering together in the service of worship, but even that spilling over into the fellowship of the saints.
Being there for your brothers and sisters.
Yes, exactly. Fellowship meals here at the church, that the church facilitates those times, but also gathering together in homes.
Let me come to this distinction you made, and I don't know whether you made it having read the same stuff that my old friend Steve Hayhow has, between entertainment and rest. Steve articulated this distinction with such clarity, and his point was that rest is an activity. There's a kind of purposefulness to it in biblical thought and in mature, pastorally aware, rich Christian family life. You rest by doing stuff together. You rest by a kind of self-conscious, okay, so what should we do this afternoon? It's 3:30. Sometimes my family and I got home, we've eaten, and normally one of my daughters will say, so what are we going to do? And she's looking at her watch. She's got to drive back to college at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. She really wants to do something as a family, and I'm really glad of that.
Yes.
We live in suburban Fort Worth. You live in Lipan. So just talk to us about like the kinds of things that you do as a family to enrich that time Sunday afternoons.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, I'm not sure if we've read the same literature. A lot of my delineation between those two has been maybe more of the psychological of just the recognition, and I couldn't point you to a source, but that when you are looking at things, and it's commonly the justification behind it is I've got so many things going on, especially during the week. I've got so many things cramming my brain. I just need my brain to shut off. For a little bit.
Right.
And so there's the doom scrolling on social media or the TV shows and whatnot. And the reality is that our brains they don't shut off. That's not really ever what happens other than when you're sleeping. But even then, there's things that are going on. And so it's a recognition of, I like that distinction of it. You're still doing something, but there's a difference between what is restful and what is not. And when you're just flickering, especially the quick changes, that's very common amongst the little quick clips that are passing through. Your brain is engaging with something, and it's either flitting back and forth between all of these different topics, and so it's cramming lots of different categories in your brain all at once, or you're trying to follow a TV show and the storyline, and you're basically cramming more in on top of what you've already got going on, instead of letting the activities that you're doing allow some of those things to melt into their proper places. And so for us, we enjoy, my wife and I have always been, we're not sports fanatics by any stretch of the imagination. We haven't been to a professional game in who knows how long, but we enjoy playing. And our kids enjoy playing. And so we'll go to the batting cages that they're in town, and we'll toss around with the kids. We'll throw. The older girls are practicing pitching, and so we'll do that with them. Ezra, I'm trying to teach him as much as I can about woodworking, and so we'll go into the shop. I've got him a little woodworking bench. Nice. And so it's and if we were going to be legalistic about it, well, we're working.
Yes.
But that's something that is, working with our hands. It's not something where we're trying to meet a deadline or produce for monetary value.
Exactly. It's not remunerative. It's not.
Exactly.
You're doing it. You're building a relationship with your kid rather than you're building a chair or a table.
That's exactly right. And so I'm for his birthday last year, and got him just a single piece of cedar, and we took that, chopped it up, and built a birdhouse out of it. And so just things like that try to engage the kids, try to have intentional time together, but where we've got opportunities to talk, but more so we're just enjoying being together in the presence.
There's a kind of paradox, isn't there? Because entertainment of the kind that you describe can feel easier because it's passive, but it's psychologically and mentally draining.
Yes.
Whereas rest of the kinds of things you're talking about, going to the batting cages, going to the wood shop with your son, it feels more demanding. It's active, but it's actually more restful because you have your mind, something to do with being engaged in something physical, isn't it?
Yes.
Shop Class as Soul Craft? You come across that book?
Yes.
Yeah. And just especially for those of us who work in kind of knowledge work or basically non-manual work, which is certainly me. I can sit at a desk for 10 hours a day working. It's actually profoundly restful I'm not a great woodworker like you, but I like messing around with wooden things. Sure. But doing stuff with my hands in that kind of way, it is, okay, I've got to get up and do this, but it is restful, and doing it with your kids, especially when they're younger, it's great.
Yes. And just recognizing, again, this is both, I think, theological as well as psychological, but the physical presence with people as a function of that rest that we need, and we desperately need so badly, and we, especially when most of the things in our lives tend to isolate us more than gather us together. And so our church our congregation is so spread out. And so from Frisco and Chico, Wichita Falls, down south, Granbury and Lipan. Yeah. And so I would encourage, just practically congregation members that are more central, that are closer to the church, to take opportunities to find people that visitors or members to invite them over to your homes and make sure that those people that are driving are taken care of. They've got places to go, to come and fellowship, that they don't have to, it'd be nice to not have to worry. I mean, this isn't just practical, but about the snacks and just getting home as fast as possible. but encouraging the fellowship of the saints amongst the body of Christ.
Yeah. I want to drop something in here just briefly that Pastor Shaw and I have been talking about. Maybe he's mentioned to you as well about fellowship groups. You can go ahead and use a fellowship hall after the second worship service on Sunday if you need to.
Sure.
Because often if you've got people coming a long way, get 2 or 3 fellowship groups together, have a meal then. Maybe that's good.
Yeah.
I want to pick up just a couple of things, and I'll start with the sleep issue. You mentioned sleep, but there have been more than a number of times. Just for me personally, I kind of Sundays start quite early, and at the end of a kind of hectic week, it feels like the end of a week. It's obviously the beginning of a week, but it feels like the end of a week.
Sure.
Get to 2 o'clock or 2:30, I feel like I just hit a brick wall. And one of the things that's really interesting about having children, especially now for me, adult children, 2 of whom are living away from home during the week, is how disappointed they are if dad just disappears upstairs to go to sleep. And it's something I've really been fighting against, and God be praised with a degree of success just in the last few months. Like, no. If I'm feeling exhausted on Sunday afternoon, that is a sign that something needs to change some other day during the week.
Sure.
And I've been grateful to my kids, although sometimes I'm not sure they believe me. I genuinely am grateful to them. Oh, Dad, don't go up to sleep. We want to play a game. And I think that's great. And when they were younger, it was similar. But it's with 2 of them now living away from home.
Yeah.
I've found that challenging. And I guess I think it's not that I would say going to sleep on Sunday afternoon is bad. Absolutely not. And I think especially for mums who spend the other 6.5 days with their children the whole time, this is an opportunity when dad is around that they can take some downtime and have a nap in the afternoon, where they can't do that when they've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. So I think people are in different places, but at the same time, I would want to say, look, if we can take a really positive view of this precious time that we have, we've cleared the decks of regular weekly commitments, and now we've said, we want to use this to be with other people for fellowship, hospitality, building relationships, resting in that rich sense. Then take too much tiredness at that point as a clue that something else needs to change.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Should we talk about our wives? How we help them rest? I'm not sure I've always done this brilliantly, but I've very frequently been aware of it. It can best be posed as a question, perhaps. How can we most effectively give rest, as if we're men, to our wives when so much of the normal functioning of the household relies upon their regular work, often especially cooking, but with younger children, looking after the kids and so on?
Yeah.
You got any thoughts about that?
One of the things that I think hasn't worked out as much in the last month or so, but what, by God's grace, when it has worked well, is taking more of the cooking on the weekends when I've got more time.
We want to see you cook, brother.
We're
having smoked meat again. Excellent.
That's exactly right. Yes, which it kind of goes when we've planned it well. What we've tended to do is, or what I've tried to do is, not only have smoked meats for one meal, but to do quite a few meats. That way we can kind of spread it out throughout the week, and so they can, fill the content of tacos and nachos and any of the Mexican dishes that you enjoy, really.
Yeah.
And so that's one way to try to give her a break, especially when I've got so many late nights. And so there's not as much opportunity to do that during the week, other than picking up a buy one get one free pizza on Tuesday nights or something. So that's
helpful.
Yeah, that's one way. And then I what you alluded to earlier about just spending time with the kids. And that way she doesn't feel as much necessity to monitor all the time, because otherwise, especially when you've got kids that or even one out of a brood that tends to get in trouble, meaning get into things that she shouldn't.
You just narrowed it down from 4 to
Right.
3.
Yeah, exactly. Then, she has this default. I mean, we're in the middle of a conversation and she just perks up. Where is she? I need to know where she is right now.
Right.
And you can tell that's just something that happens, every, I don't know, every 60 seconds or so during the day. And so just having me there, spending time. Yes.
Yeah.
And but it's even more than that. I think I've noticed that my wife loves me being with our kids.
Yeah.
And so even that kind of the enjoyment side of it, which is unquestionably a part of the rest, is the joy that the Lord wants not just to stop working, but to experience that joy in Christ. And so I think that's reflected somewhat, and I really think that lightens her heart.
I think that's probably far more salient to our wives than it is to us.
Yes.
Because I can remember when at your kind of stage of life, I'm out most of the week, either in my office or in town or something.
Right.
And when I'm at home, I'm with the kids 100% of the time that I'm at home. But it's just that that's only about 15% of the time. And so Nicole sees this other great swath of time when Dad's away, and she rightly perceives there's this little precious window on Friday night, Saturday, and then Sunday afternoon,
right,
when this is precious, all of the family time.
Yes.
So, yeah. There's one other thing I want to pick up on, and it's where the distinctions about what's permissible in terms of entertainment, I guess entertainment, using the wrong word, but okay, entertainment, leisure, rest pursuits, where they become quite loaded with contemporary options that weren't necessarily anticipated explicitly in late Bronze Age Israel, but which raise real questions for people. So, for example, there's a bunch of stuff we could do on Sunday afternoon, theoretically. Go to a restaurant, go to the cinema, you could go to the gym, you could go to jiu-jitsu class, there's a whole bunch of things. And traditionally in the Reformed world, these have either been answered, I think, quite woodenly, normally with a no, or they have been addressed, they've not really been addressed at all. Like that's too difficult to think about, and it is difficult to think about. The wooden no is actually of the Westminster Confession's position, to which, as an ordained pastor in the CRC, I take an exception, along with almost all the CRC pastors that I know. The Westminster Confession actually forbids what is sometimes called lawful recreation, which is to say things that are fine to do the rest of the time, playing games, soccer, baseball, whatever, you're not allowed to do on the Lord's Day. It's entirely to be taken up with exercises of worship and charity and mercy and so on. So I don't think that's true.
Sure.
But I think it's getting at something which is true. It's getting at a number of things which are true. So first is the priority of worship and the priority of rest and the priority of relationship building and family and so on. And I think almost the first step towards addressing this question of can I go to a jiu-jitsu class or can I go to the gym is to say, well, hold on, wait. Before you ask that question, can you tell me whether or not that both on this particular Sunday and in general over the last 4, 5, 6 Sundays, you've taken advantage of the opportunities and fulfilled your obligations to rest, worship, give rest to others. Yeah. Because it's one thing to say, maybe you go to the gym at 6 p.m., for an hour after having a full, rich, enjoyable day of all these fellowship and everything else. It's another thing to say you're going to go to the gym from 2 till 7 every Sunday, driving out other opportunities for things. So there's that caveat to throw in. Yeah. Do you want to? Here's putting you on the spot. I mean, I before putting you on the spot, I'll say I think there is a range of views on things like, is it okay to go to a restaurant? Is it okay to go to cinema? Is it okay to go to the gym? Which certainly are present among conscientious Bible-believing Christians.
Sure.
They're also present among not so conscientious Bible-believing Christians.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like us all to get more conscientious. I'm not meaning to outright condemn people who have a slightly different take from me, but I would
Sure.
really like us to be thinking in a principled way about this. And so some of the questions, well, is it okay to go out to a restaurant? Could our fellowship group go out to a restaurant on Sunday? I'll tell you what I think. I think that's not a good idea, because what that basically involves doing is enlisting the service of a bunch of people supplying a luxury good and a luxury service
Sure.
in a way that involves them not being able to rest on the Sabbath.
Sure.
It's not that it's always a sin to grab a burger on the middle of a long journey when there's no other way of getting food.
Right.
But it's just, if you can't see the difference between those things, there's a degree of necessity and a degree of urgency, which is important to recognize.
And I think the normalcy of it, and even in church circles where growing up, going out to eat after the service on a Sunday was extremely common. Extremely common. And I know that that's very much the case in much religious culture in the South. And so some of that is, I don't always thinking about what was normal 150, 200 years ago is always the right way to go, because, obviously there's a lot of things that we like about our day and age that we don't want to go back to that. But thinking of that aspect of it, of, okay, if we were going to go out to eat after the Lord's service, what would that look like 200 years ago? Well, it would look like having your servants working, making a meal for you and bringing it to you, and your servants or someone else's servants, or, but people that you were employing to come, even if it's within your own home. Right.
And now we call those servants waiters and waitresses.
Right. And someone else is employing them.
But you're paying them.
But you're paying, yeah, exactly. So there's a little bit of a separation, or maybe a distinction without a difference, kind of a thing going on there.
And so in terms of the Exodus commandment, the Sabbath commandment, that's like, well, no, you shouldn't be requiring your servant, quote unquote, to work.
Right.
So there's something luminously simple and liberating about the Chick-fil-A heuristic, isn't it? Like, well, we don't need to do this, right? And hey, guess what? It's one of the, if not the most, I don't know whether profitable, but it's certainly leading in surveys and number of outlets, fast food outlets certainly in the South, right?
Right.
Yeah. I got to tell the story about my old friend Nick Pike, which you've heard me tell before, who opened a restaurant in just north of London in the early 2000s, in the midst of the worst recession in living memory, and never opened on a Sunday. He's never once served a meal on a Sunday, I don't think, except when he's cooked for his own staff. Sometimes he's done that. But so all of his staff, including some who aren't Christians, get a weekend day off, which is unheard of in the British hospitality industry. And that restaurant, so it's giving up 15 or 20% of its revenue opportunities.
Sure.
And it has been the most incredible success. It's like 3 or 4 now in this little small chain. Yeah. So that Lord can bless things that are the fruit of obedience and faithfulness.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't know the distinctive changes that have happened over the last several decades in Texas specifically, but I know, there used to be Sabbath day laws.
This were in England
quite a long time ago, I think. But it would be interesting. It is interesting the way that those have changed, and I will be the first to acknowledge, we've definitely picked up food on Sundays when we need to, and so it's one of those things where, again, trying to adhere to the principle of, that's really something that we need to recognize our own lack of preparation when that happens. Yeah. And so now we've got a better goal in mind of what that day is for, what our time should be for there, what kinds of things we can deal with, whether it's the kids being a little bit hungrier than they would like to be, or throwing a granola bar in the truck, or really simple things that just to make sure that when we go to the grocery store that week, that we make sure that we've got a box of granola bars, that we can do that. It really doesn't take a whole lot. or making sure that we've got leftovers from previous meals at home ready to throw into the microwave. And, even the technology to be able to warm up a meal
Yes.
in a moment.
Yeah. That's amazing. Isn't it? That relies itself on people doing works of mercy and sort of quasi 21st century necessity.
Right.
And we recognize the fluidity of these categories. I guess I'd say just in closing, and then we should conclude. I think
Mm-hmm.
a helpful heuristic for people thinking about either one-off or regular activities that on the face of it involve drawing other people into their normal paid work,
Mm-hmm.
jiu-jitsu classes, gym, going to the cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Ask yourself, where do you lie on these spectra of, is this one-off and it's kind of sort of need, there's no other way, I'm driving back 9 hours and I'm going to fall asleep at the wheel if I don't have some coffee?
Yeah.
Or is it regular and it's starting to be like a luxury that, frankly, I could, if I bent my back a little bit, I could find another way of meeting this need.
Right.
And what impact, also crucially, what impact is it having on other things that I could be doing? And those things will change. So if maybe it's the case that a young man who's single goes to the gym where he just works out for an hour and a half between 3 o'clock and 4:30 on a Sunday afternoon. Great, fine. I don't think I'm going to say that's a breach of the scriptural regulations.
Sure.
But if he gets married and has a kid, or even if he gets married and doesn't yet have a kid, well, you might want to talk to your wife about that.
Right.
Because same with golf, same with other activities that could crowd out things that we could and should be doing in that precious time.
Sure.
And just to keep tabs on what is this doing to the rest of my life and what particularly is it doing to my embrace and enjoyment of the Lord's Day. It's very important.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
I think just the common thread of preparation, thinking ahead, because often it's just trying to be in the moment and forgetting that that's a necessity, and that having to do even with the point of being extra tired on a Sunday afternoon, and well, did I not sleep well the last however many nights? How much am I on my phone before I'm trying to sleep? That's not really letting my brain rest, and I'm not really getting good sleep, and all of these things fold into each other.
Agreed.
And so just having a concept of the principle and how you want to meet that goal for your family, for yourself, and then making decisions accordingly to prepare for that.
Yeah, great. You've been listening to the All Saints podcast with Tyler Turner and me, Steve Jeffrey. Thanks for joining us. God bless.
Thank you.
Bye for now.